Howie and Beastmode podcast, where we discuss all things business, including growth, strategy, and execution, as well as personal and professional development. Let's join Howie and Beastmode in conversation.
Well, hey, Beastmode, it is so good to reconnect here on the podcast.
It's always great to speak with you, Howie. It's the highlight of my week.
Awesome, mine too. Well, I'm pretty excited actually about our little endeavor this evening because we've been on this series, Stretching for Growth. Last week we talked about using the phone in your business, making sure that somebody's making calls. Now, if you're in sales, that should be you. Everybody should be making calls. Honestly, even in my last role, where I had 7 sales reps, I was making some calls usually on Friday afternoons, and we actually did get a deal with that cold call. I actually got it from a cold call, a deal. So everybody should be using the phone, but we wanted to, as we do these planning sessions, me and Beast Mode, and we were talking about what to cover, and we kind of think we've got 2 pretty cool weeks back to back. And what we always think is that this is really for us, and then we hope it helps you because we get to talk about our business together and really think about different topics in this segment and way. But yeah, so last week we talked about the phone. So Beastman, what are we talking about on this momentous podcast?
Yeah, as we were prepping and kind of letting the cards unfold, we were talking and we said, you know what, we've gone through sales and what stretching is, but we haven't talked about content development. And I think my comment was that's probably the most important part, because we could talk about how often to say things, what to say to clients, when you should do it. But if we don't know what to say, it's kind of irrelevant.
It's funny, as a sales manager, I really have gotten on the bandwagon of using templates and doing prepared content for my sales reps. But it's only been in the last year and a half or so. I have always assumed that everybody's a good writer because I'm kind of a writer. I've always been a bit of a writer, and it doesn't mean I'm strong at everything, or that I'm even a strong writer. But it's been a little bit of an affinity, a little bit of strength for me. But actually, as I look at rep content on the sales team, it does kind of vary a lot. And even if they're a good writer, they may not understand the topic, or they may not have enough time to draft it very well. So when you talk about content planning as being one of the most important things, we're about to unpack why that is, and that's just one example. But I think for the first time ever, I want to share. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to share the first couple of bullet points, and then I think I'm going to share my screen, which we don't normally do on a podcast, but I think I'm going to do it just for a quick minute at a certain point here in a couple, like probably in 60 seconds. So first of all, Beast Mode, you're with your business, JL Development, you help people with social media. So what's the why? Why does content planning matter? Why does content matter?
Yes. Number one, the content is what differentiates you from your competitors. And the more clear that you can get your message across of who you are, what you're doing, what you want the customer to ultimately do. And everybody has a customer. I don't care if you're selling chicken sandwiches or roofs. Everybody has a customer. And so the content portion, whether it's an email or a phone call or a social media post, it doesn't matter. We need to get that point across clear, and it needs to be as quick as possible.
I totally agree. So a couple of the specific things that you can use or that you want to think about when it comes to your why does content planning matter are your sales and marketing emails. So I talked to you a second ago about how, I've noticed a need to develop templates that my reps can use to help them send their very best email every time instead of wasting time drafting, custom emails for every single situation and every single customer. So I'm going to share my screen really quick to show you a little bit about what that might look like. And I'm going to hide my show notes because then I'm giving away all the sauce. But I am going to share, let's see, I haven't done this in a whole 5 minutes. Oh, here we go. Okay. So we talked a little bit about using call automation systems. We talked about using HubSpot. This is HubSpot. This is mine. I'm currently using HubSpot to find a job, but I'm using it. I'm treating this like a sales role that I'm in right now. And so I've built out like, I don't know, 150 probably recruiters that are in the system now, and I keep in touch with them. So how do I keep in touch with all these people? It's with automation. So I use an automation. I actually bought a paid version of HubSpot. I negotiated very strictly because funds are not what they could be right now, being unemployed. But I did buy the professional version, which has their sequences product. Now, if you want a little life hack, what I was going to do is I was going to use a tool called Klenty, Klenty,
Yeah.
which works with HubSpot, and it's only like one of the versions is $60 a month. There might be one cheaper that might be like a $40 a month as well, and it is compatible with HubSpot. So it'll actually allow you to do what I'm about to show you with this external tool, and it seems to be good. It doesn't have a dialer, but your HubSpot does, or your phone. You can just use your phone, for your calls. But for your email automation, actually, for your sales emails, Klenty, Klenty. I vetted it out. I was going to use it, but I beat up HubSpot so much that they gave me a good deal, and it was a stretch, but I made it happen. But yeah, so I don't want you to think you can't automate things unless you use one of these platforms directly like HubSpot. Okay, anyway, so when you think about, I have to reach out to, I'm going to illustrate something really quick, actually. So you go to my contacts, and if you look at, so I've got them organized in certain ways. One of the ways is that I've got people that are in sequence. Okay, check this out. Recruiters that are in a sequence in automation, okay, is 80 right now. Okay, recruiters that used to be in sequence, but they responded, so they fell out, are 64, right? So I have 144 people that have either been in an automation sequence or are in an automation sequence right now, right? How could I possibly write all those emails, right?
Right.
And so that's the answer. So we talked about content, and that's, did you say something?
No, I was agreeing with you.
Oh, okay, okay. So I'm going to show you now an example. So if I'm going to go to the sequence here, it's slow. Hopefully it won't freeze on me. Okay, here we go. So this is a recruiter follow-up sequence. So once I've had a conversation with them or some kind of a digital touch, I will put them in I will enroll them in this sequence. And if I go look at the content that's in here, there's, as you can see, there's automated email number 1, and you can see what I've written here. So I wrote, that's the example of why content's important, right?
Right.
Another example here is content email number 2, recruiter step 2. And here it's a shorter message saying a few keywords to trigger them. Okay, so there's 5 of these, and I intend on doing another one for the people who fell out of sequence or already completed the sequence. So here's my point, and I'm gonna stop sharing because the point is all this great, whether it be an automated sequence like this, or whether it be just having good old templates, even in Word, even in Microsoft Word, that you can copy paste from your desktop or whatever your tool is, or Klenty or whatever it is, your content is really critical because then you can reuse it over and over and over, and it's at a high level, it's at a high standard. And I've had compliments from recruiters on how well I'm staying in touch, and I've even had them. I have a couple of, I have a funny thing about Star Wars. I have a heartwarming story about my daughter. I got a nice, a very warm response from a recruiter from that one, and I got some compliments on the Star Wars funny thing. So the point is that from a content planning perspective, you want to really think about humor, and you want to think about insight, because, and also your message, your offering, and the problems that you're seeking to solve, because you can use those in a variety of different ways. So now we're going to talk through, I showed you the why it matters a little bit, but I do want to talk about some other things that you can use your content for. So I kind of covered beast mode. I kind of covered sales and marketing emails, and how important it is that we have content written in a library somewhere that we could then use for sales and marketing emails. But what are some other things that create the why of why content planning matters so much.
Yes. First of all, I couldn't agree more. Whenever you're trying to stay in contact with, I mean, you can put probably more than 5 people. It's difficult. And so the more you can have a sequence and more you can have it planned out, better. It should be short. It should be concise and to the point. Again, everybody's short and concise is different. I'm probably way shorter, and Brian's probably a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
struggle I have. It's not my strength to do short stuff. So yeah, it's a constant battle for me personally.
but and so that's kind of, when you have the emails and the sales marketing aspect, you need to know where you're going, and that's the internal side. So if I have my content planned, then I know these are the steps I'm walking through, and I know if this person's on step 3 and my goal is to get them to step 7, then I know where I'm at. So I know if leadership or somebody above me asks, hey, where's this person at? Well, they're on step 3. I'm working to get them to step 7. What's the hurdle? What's keeping them from getting to step 4? I know this. I can have an honest conversation. If it's, well, I've emailed them 4 times and we're here and we talked about this, and we were on the phone. We had a great conversation for 45 minutes. We talked about golf. Well, where are they? And you don't know because you haven't taken that time to set out the development process. Where are we? And the most important part of it is with the final step. The final step is the sale, the conversion, the subscription, whatever the end goal is. That is obviously, we need to know, how do we get there, and everybody in the process. And you know what? From as a position of leadership, I don't want anybody underneath me to be able to dictate that process. It needs to be uniform all the way across the board so that everybody knows, no matter what does step 3 mean? Well, step 3 means this for everybody. I can't have, salesperson A have a step 3 that's actually step 6, and I can't have a salesperson B who only has four steps. So part of that's the uniformity and just getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah. No, it's nice, and I like how you emphasize the steps because step number 1, you cover this content. Step number 2 is compatible, but you cover a little bit more content, and then you build on it and you build on it and so forth. So what I've had people go all the way to the 5th email, and then they finally respond, and sometimes they apologize, like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I've been getting the messages. I appreciate it. I didn't wait." Actually, I had a guy call me. I remember because I was in my bathroom, and he called me on. I wasn't going to the bathroom, but I was in the bathroom. And just whatever, getting ready for the day or something. And he
Sure.
called me and goes, "Hey, Lynn, I'm really sorry. I'm not ignoring you." And I'm like, I wasn't offended. I mean, I didn't even know that the content was going out because I schedule these things, like quite seriously, close to 3 weeks in advance, and they get them every 7 or 8 days, right? And but yeah, so Beast Mode's so spot on because you really want to understand, are they converting at step 1 or step 4? When are they going to restart converting or responding to you? And if step 4 doesn't ever work, and if no one's even opening it, let alone clicking on it, let alone replying to it, then you need to understand that maybe you should be testing another message at step 4 and retire that if it's failing. So the great thing, I think this is, you kind of lit on it, but I want to park on it for a couple seconds, is
Yeah.
that if you have official content standards, then there's testability.
Yeah.
If everybody writes their own stuff all the time, then there's no way to sort of like track what works.
Or what doesn't work.
Yes.
Effectiveness. This email gets a response this quickly, in less than 24 hours. Whereas this email, it has important content. We can't delete it. We have to have it. But the drip rate, the response rate is so slow that we probably need to move it. We need to move it back because we need to have these people more sucked in so that when we deliver this really important content, they're already ready to respond,
Mm.
and that's part of, how broad am I starting? Because you can't be real specific in the beginning, you have to start, you have to cast that wide net, and you're constantly, as we're going to get to, you're constantly narrowing. And part of it is I'm weeding you out. If you're not serious, doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means, let's stay in contact, but we're going to stay in contact over here. I'm narrowing down to find out who's going to do my step 7, which is buy my product, subscribe, enroll, purchase, whatever it is,
Yeah. So important, so important. Another thing that really, that we talked about a little bit in our prep was the fact that, even your even your calls, when you develop good content about, and by the way, your content is like, what problems are you solving? What are typical problems the industry deals with in your space? What's your offering look like? What's your why? What's your purpose? What's your differentiate? There's a lot of things that can become your content. It could just be stories. Beastmode really likes to engage his customers on their personal brand, on their story, on their family, videos of family, videos of them talking, and he's really good about that. And so all of that's content planning. And that might be step 3 for a certain social campaign or an email campaign, or it might be a later step, or it might be the first step. But you plan that out, and then you have auditability, and you also have sort of like this sense of where you are in your your outreach. But call scripts is another thing that we talked last week. It's a perfect thing to bring up because we talked about the phone last week. Now we're talking about content planning. And what's great about content planning is that I can give my sales reps or myself, or my customer service agent, if it's not a sales thing, it's just like a customer service deal, I can give them content as well with call scripts and talking points. But the next one is actually social posts. So talk a little bit about how content planning has helped you, because you guys do a lot of that.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the social post aspect of how it could help.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to say is, and it's actually the last insight email content email that I sent out, was talking about, are you providing content in your social post, or are you couponing? Most people go straight to step 7, buy my product, and they don't ever talk about anything else, about why or who you are, or what's the deal about the product. They go straight to buy my product, and I call it couponing. And the reason why is because the only way you can go, and we're just using 7 steps, the only way you can get to step 7 and without doing the other steps is by couponing. You have to cut a deal. You have to give a percentage off. You have to buy one, get one free. You have to say $30 off if you act today. You have to do it because the individuals aren't bought in. They have no buy-in. And so the only way to get them to buy in is to give them a discount. And while that does work, and there's a vast majority of industries that do that on the regular, they spend their entire life couponing whenever people would pay more if you would just get buy-in. The problem is that if you coupon, somebody's always going to have a cheaper coupon. Somebody's always going to have a buy 2 get 1 free, or whatever it is.
I think it's really important, and the same content that they write for their 7-step campaign or their sales campaign or their call script, that same content for their social posts can be used to drive their website content, promotional content, print content. So once you have it, once you might have, for example, for let's say you've got 2 solutions. So for solution A, you might have, here's a list of the pain that the customer probably is experiencing because they don't have your solution today. So you have a written pain statement. Actually, I might want to show something again. I have something I did for somebody at a software company a few months ago, actually.
I'll even touch on this real quick while you're pulling that up.
Yeah.
So for JL, most of the brands that we work with, we will not have a post, an ad, anything like that even talks about buying your product specifically. That's what the whole post or whole ad is about for at least 60 days. We won't do it because we haven't sufficiently told the story. It doesn't mean that we don't have call to actions. It doesn't mean that we aren't, saying, towards the end of a post or towards the end of an ad, check this out. It doesn't mean that. It just means we are not spending time talking about a product that people have no idea anything about, or really they don't know anything about your brand, your business before. And it's so worth it to spend that 60 days building that foundation.
I totally agree. So I'm going to show you something that I did for not a customer. He's really more of a friend, someone I decided to help for free during my time off here. But I built this basically a sales messaging planner. You can kill the word. I mean, you really should call it a messaging planner, to be honest, because it could be for marketing, it could be for events, it could be for anything. So a messaging planner, I forgot I made it look pretty. Actually, his version wasn't this pretty, which is hilarious. But basically what I did for Steve at this banking software company was I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we, first of all, understand what is the pain, and we write the pain in the customer's voice. So when I say customer's voice, and I'll just go through it really quickly. And if you guys want this, just email me. Just actually, do this actually, put a comment on the YouTube. Because we it helps our rankings if you comment and like and stuff actually. So that would be nice. And I'll be happy to send this to you. In fact, I'll send you the whole thing. It's got a lot of good junk on here. But you need to understand what problem are you solving. So you need to say that pain in the customer's voice. For example, here's the customer's voice. We are a small bank. We struggle to compete against the large banks when it comes to lending. They can usually provide automatic loan approval versus we have to have a staff manually review paperwork. And that's costing us money, and it's making us not competitive. So that's a pain, okay? And by the way, that is actually the pain that Steve has that's what he solves for his company, is one of those things. And then the pain in the vendor or the salesperson's voice might be something like, we noticed that mid-size and small banks in the United States have struggled to compete against the big boys like Bank of America and Chase because their loan approval process is not automated. And so that's again, you're not saying anything about your solution. You're just stating the pain, right? And then you can use both of those types of pain in different types of content. And then you designate what is the specific future negative business impact if not addressed. What is a specific future vision? Basically, this is your hero story, your good story. What happens if it is addressed? And what's a catchy phrase that inspires action? So in this case, this is a loan origination system startup, basically. And so I gave him a catchy phrase. I said, we give you the customer, or we give you the power of right now loans. And that's it. That's as short as it is. And I'm not an industry insider, and that actually sounds pretty good to me. The power of right now loans. So his name, actually I won't tell you, but Steve's company, no name, we offer the power of right now loans because they provide loan origination systems that help small and mid-sized banks and credit unions be more successful and competitive, because now they're just as automated as Chase, right? Anyway, so that's just some stuff that this is a lot, actually. I forgot it was that extensive. So anyway, I'm gonna stop sharing, but it gives you an example of, you need to sit down and think about these kinds of things. What's your pain? What's your solution? And that will help you drive your messaging planning.
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to have to pick the pace up a little bit just because, I think
I know we're almost out of time.
Could talk a lot on this, but again, the same content that you're using to start and to formulate your emails, you're using a similar version for your call scripts. You're using a similar version for your social, similar for your websites, because you're taking everybody through the same process. If you're in print or events, it's the same thing. And quite frankly, you need the uniformity across the entire board. Now, again, in an event, you're going to have an entire hour, so you can put more information in. Whereas if you have an email, it needs to be less. But let's go to the next point. So the next point is, where are we getting content ideas and inspiration? Where do you get yours from, Howie?
I usually look at my current my CRM system. I look at the comments that customers have made, and I track what were the pain points that they came to me with. So that's one of the ways. That's one of the places I get content. I will also get customer quotes when Debbie at a certain large insurance company that I sold to said that this is a nightmare. Blah 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 blah. Right? That's a great quote. Or when she says, "You guys really took us to the next level in terms of the visibility of our business." So I have those kinds of quotes. So I take, even if I have to anonymize them and not use their name, I take their pain points and their dreams and their goals and their visions, and also their successes with us. And I turn those types of things into content. So for me, it's funny. You see where people come from. I'm always paying first, and even in that quick answer, I wasn't planning that answer, and even then, I was paying first. There's a lot of other places you can go, and some of it's going to have to be your traditional marketing messaging about here's what our product does and we solve this problem and here's our differentiators. But that's some of the places that I've gotten inspiration.
Yeah, I think very similar is for me. I think about what would I do in this circumstance if I was a new brand. How would I do it? Now, again, I have the pleasure of having a fairly young small business, but I mean I started a nonprofit back in May of this year, 2020, and I'm walking it through the same process. So I have that insider knowledge of what would I do next. And basically that's all I'm doing. I'm sharing a consolidated version of what was my next step. And some of it is literally, I just took the next step. We were talking about HubSpot and all this, the past couple episodes, month or two. And it's like, well, the reason why we're talking about it is because I just did it. And you should do the same thing too. So that's part of where you're getting the content from as well. Now, it's not step 7. Step 7 needs to be identified and defined. You can't stumble upon what goal do you want your customer to do. That one has to be clearly defined.
That's great. Well, we're almost out of time. So those are some other ideas for content. I would also, read your competitors' websites and see, look at the major. Doesn't mean you copy them, but you just look at what topics are they covering, and make sure you're covering those. Implementation of the messaging. What did you mean by that on our notes?
Implementation. So what are we doing? How are we utilizing it? And you walked, everybody through. We're right now we're using HubSpot. Howie's using a paid version of it. I'm using it a different way, more manual, but again, same process, triangle it on a smaller scale, because I'm using different touches. So that's really the implementation of it, is that there are things out there to help you with this. And again, if you need more in-depth talk on that, then just comment. We'll walk you through that.
Yeah, happy to do a talk one-on-one with people. No obligation. Also, we kind of plan to talk a little bit about. We probably should try to wrap it up in 2 minutes, but just very quickly, one of the benefits of content planning and having kind of yourself a little bit of a library so that you always say things a certain way isn't just so you can see if it works or doesn't work, and also to see what step you're in and all that, because all those are valid. But it's also to make sure that your message has kind of like a harmony among itself. So what's great is like I can make sure that I set it this way over here, and that's compatible when I start talking about the other product or a different use case. It's still a compatible messaging. So I think when you do content planning, you want to make sure that that you have a messaging standard, that you say it this way, and that you always say it that way until you change it, and then you need to change that everywhere. And so you have sort of like messaging standards and messaging agreement. Beastmode and I are coming from more of the sales, the business development, the branding side, and the social side in our respective companies. This is probably more your classic corporate marketing type thing to think about. But I think every small and mid-sized business ought to be thinking about the way you talk about your service and your product and having messaging standards.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things as you're doing this process, first thing you should do before you implement it is have it implemented on yourself. See if it's a process you would actually go through. See if there's what does it sound like whenever it's being emailed or it's being messaged to me? Let me see it. Let me read it. Quite frankly, have somebody else read it to you.
Yeah.
See if it comes across the way you're anticipating. And lastly, what does good content do? You want to go first, Howie?
Yeah, because I'm kind of passionate about this, but I want to hear your take on it. Really, good content, it kind of goes back to the why, but it's an important thing to wrap up with. Good content really establishes connection. And if you think about it, my doctor, she asked me to start taking vitamin D. Great, for XYZ reasons, that's fine. When I have a different supplement or a different vitamin or a related topic, I'm going to go to her because she gave me the content about vitamin D and gave me that guidance and that advice, right? So now I think of her for nutritional supplements. The same thing is with content. You start to sort of like, you establish first of all, you establish a connection with the market and a connection with consumers or buyers. But then you also, on the other hand, you establish credibility to where when they have anything even approaching the need, you've branded yourself as that. Like most people would say that if they needed help with branding or social, they would probably follow up with Beastmode, right? Versus if they followed up with me, it would probably be about cybersecurity type topics, or maybe HubSpot would be appropriate. So those are some things that establishes connection and credibility when you spend time with content. So you need to allow yourself the hours. And I know Beastmode described it. I can't remember if he said a couple of weeks or something, but quite some time. You need to allow yourself that time to build your content out. It's
60.
Not a waste of time.
60 days.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, completely agree. It builds a connection, it establishes credibility, but most importantly, it's next steps. It causes the reader, the customer to take next steps, whatever that next steps is. And some of that next steps could be reply back to an email, schedule a meeting, purchase your product, subscribe to your service, whatever it is. Okay. Good content causes action. So we have so much that we're going to keep discussing on stretching. All of this is stretching us as we share it with you. We hope it's stretching you as you're looking to implement it, trying to implement it. Again, you can find this podcast, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere that you can look for a podcast. It's there. Be sure to engage us. And as always, we're so appreciative of your time.